Turn of the 7th and 8th centuries, the Western Mediterranean suffered from raids by new invaders. This time, the rapid expansion in the region was initiated by the forces of the Umayyad Caliphate, a Muslim state that was conquering new lands and peoples. The African coast west of Libya, Central and Western Sahara, and the territory of modern-day Morocco. These lands were later referred to by the Muslims as the Maghreb. The local nomadic and warlike tribes of the Tuareg and other Berber peoples quickly adopted Islam and reinforced the Umayyad armies. Other Berber peoples quickly adopted Islam and reinforced the Umayyad armies. This happened because Muslim clerics promised wealth from wars and eternal bliss in the afterlife to those who perished in the holy war against infidels. The rapid advance of Muslim conquerors through the African Mediterranean can also be explained by the severe crisis in Byzantium, where the 7th century was marked by palace coups, civil wars, and religious conflicts. Additionally, the once mighty Byzantine Empire had been significantly weakened by the effects of the so-called Plague of Justinian, to 25 to 40% of the Mediterranean population. The Visigothic kingdom on the Iberian Peninsula was also in decline. There were lingering tensions between the Visigoths and the native Romanized population. The Visigoths made up about 6% of the kingdom's population, but held a majority of the nobility and occupied most of the key positions in the state. Moreover, laws that discriminated against the Romanized Iberians were only abolished in the 7th century. However, around the same time, the Visigothic kings began the process of insurfing a significant portion of the peasantry, most of whom were from the native population. The nobility of the Visigothic kingdom was engaged in bitter internal struggles over land and political influence. Kings were often of noble conspiracies and intrigues, and they could even be poisoned by rival families. It's no wonder that the Fifth Council of Toledo approved a law where the first 5 clauses were aimed at protecting the king and his family. Most of the Visigothic kings of the 7th and 8th centuries pursued a consistent anti-Jewish policy, which diminished the state's potential revenue from international trade and eventually led the Jewish population to side with future invaders from the south. In 694, Jews were declared slaves of the king, and their property and children were confiscated. In 709, Roderick ascended to the Visigothic throne, but the sons of the previous king, Witiza, and hostile nobility rebelled against him. Although the rebellion was suppressed, the insurgents were not completely defeated. It's likely that Witiza's sons retained control of their lands in the eastern part of the Iberian Peninsula, and recognized the new king's authority only nominally. During this civil war in the Visigothic kingdom, a small Arab detachment of about 500 men crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and raided the southern coast of Spain. The lack of significant armed resistance and the wealth of the captured loot prompted the Umayyads to launch a larger-scale invasion. In April 711, the Arab governor of Tangier, Tariq ibn Zayed, landed in southern Iberia with a force of 10,000 to 12,000 warriors, most of whom were Berbers. King Roderick decided to stop their advance in the southern part of his kingdom, commanding a force that could have numbered between 10,000 and 20,000 troops. At the Battle of Guadalete, the Visigothic army was utterly defeated. Both Christian and Arab chronicles cite various reasons for this loss, with some pointing to the betrayal of the Visigothic nobility, led by the sons of Witiza. Regardless, the defeat was catastrophic. King Roderick and much of the Visigothic took advantage of the power vacuum, capturing major cities in what is now southern Spain through assaults, sieges, or negotiations. By 713, cities like Malaga, Seville, Merida, Granada, and Cordoba had fallen, and the Muslims began the conquest of the central and eastern parts of the Iberian Peninsula. The capture of the peninsula was marked by the common atrocities of. In 714, a Muslim army of 20,000 men arrived in Iberian lands, led by Musa ibn Nusayr, who was the nominal superior of Tariq ibn Ziyad. Under Musa's command, the Arab-Berber armies subdued Leon, Guadalajara, Zaragoza, and Tarragona, conducting several campaigns into the lands of the Basques and the Asturians. Thus, nearly the entire Iberian Peninsula came under the control of the Umayyad Caliphate. Interestingly, the administrative center for these territories was in North Africa, from where the Muslim conquest had begun. The conquered lands that would become modern Spain and Portugal were named Al-Andalus by the Arabs. However, in the mountainous and rainy north, resistance to the Muslim invaders was offered by the Basques and Romanized Asturians. It was in the lands of the latter that the Kingdom of Asturias was founded, with Pelayo, a former squire of King Roderick, becoming its first ruler. Through diplomacy and marriage alliances, this Visigothic nobleman built a strong coalition of northern Iberian inhabitants and launched the Reconquista, the process of reclaiming the lands conquered by the Muslims. In 722, a small force of rebels led by Pelayo defeated a Muslim detachment of over 1,000 soldiers at the Battle of Covadonga. Though the battle had little strategic impact, it boosted the morale of the Asturians and inspired further resistance. For some time, one region of Muslim-conquered Spain stood out. The Visigothic nobleman Theodemir offered strong resistance to the Umayyad advance in Murcia. Unable to defeat him by force, the Muslims offered him the chance to retain his power and become their vassal under the condition of broad autonomy. Essentially, this territory became a dependent Visigothic mini-state, retaining its customs and laws, but paying a small tax to the conquerors and recognizing their supremacy. However, after Theodemir's death and the establishment of the independent Cordoban Caliphate, Abd al-Rahman I revoked the previous agreements. He transformed these lands into his own holdings, bringing negative changes for the local Christian population. Meanwhile, the Arab nobility continued to seek new trophies and lands to conquer. Muslim armies crossed the Pyrenees, and by 721 had captured Septimania, where the last Visigothic king, Ardo, had ruled. From there, they began raiding the heart of the Frankish kingdom, but were decisively defeated by Charles Martel in the famous Battle of Tours. By the mid-8th century, the Berber revolts spread across the Muslim-conquered Maghreb and the Iberian Peninsula. With great difficulty, the Umayyads and local Arab emirs managed to suppress these uprisings. To do so, they relied on Arab troops from Syria and the Arabian Peninsula, but due to a lack of wages and tribal rivalries, even some of these forces rebelled. In 750, a coup in the once powerful Umayyad Empire brought the Abbasids to power. Most members of the Umayyad dynasty were killed, and some territories broke away from the new dynasty's control. One of the few Umayyad survivors, Abd al-Rahman, initially tried to establish himself in the Maghreb, but after several failures landed in Spain in 755. The following year, he defeated the Emir of Cordoba. Yusuf overthrew several local rulers and conquered the entirety of Al-Andalus. He founded a new state, the Emirate of Cordoba, which encompassed nearly the entire Iberian Peninsula. Abd al-Rahman did not trust the Arab nobility or Berber tribes, so he formed his army from slaves from Africa and Europe.